Hey everybody, we're going to be in chapter 6 tonight. So there's 10 chapters in all, so this is number 6. This is standard 7.5, compare duties and functions of members of the legislative, executive, and judicial branches of Alabama's local and state governments and the national government. 6 is of the legislative branch, 7 is the executive branch, 8 is the judicial branch. That's what we got coming up. The objectives discuss the role of the legislative branch, examine the census process, describe impeachment, and examine how bills become laws. And that's what we're going to be talking about. So we'll start off with the bicameral legislature. At the Constitutional Convention, the big debate was representation. The larger states wanted more representation. The smaller states wanted it equal. The Virginia and New Jersey plans. We didn't talk about that. The Virginia plans wanted the larger states to get more votes based on their population. The New Jersey plan wanted to be based on every state getting one vote, equal representation. The Great Compromise or the Connecticut Compromise resulted in a bicameral or a two-part legislature that would have both the House of Representatives and the Senate. So this is part of this. This bicameral legislature is a two-part. It has the House and the Senate, and that's what we have today. The House of Representatives has 435 members and is based on population. This is where the census comes in. The census is going on right now. I'm going to post a video specifically about the census, so be looking out for that, about the importance of doing the census, and kind of talking what it's about a little bit. The representation for each state is based on the census. So every 10 years they do a census, which is a population count. We're doing one right now in 2020. We did one in 2010. When they do that, they determine how many people lives in a state, and then they give that state a certain amount of members of the House of Representatives. We have 7 here in the state of Alabama. We have 7 districts. We have 7 members of the House of Representatives that represents Alabama in the U.S. House of Representatives. The Senate has 100 members, 2 from each state. That's the equal representation. So we have the Virginia plan, which is based on the idea of the House of Representatives, where every state gets a certain amount based on their population. Like, for example, Alaska has 1 member of their House of Representatives because their population size. But every state gets 2 senators. There's 100 in all, 50 states, 2 from each state. So the 2 from Alabama is Richard Shelby and Doug Jones. Senators serve for 6-year terms. The election cycle is staggered, so no more than a third of the senators come for re-election at a certain time. So in that 6-year term, every 2 years, there is an election, and a third of the members of the Senate come up for a vote. 2 years later, another third, and then at the end of the 2 years, which is the 6-year period, the last of the senators come in. The last third comes up for re-election. That way you don't have like 100 brand new senators in there trying to do things from scratch. You have where there's a third at a time that comes in. Non-legislative powers. The Constitution allows Congress to propose constitutional amendments by 2/3 vote of both houses. We talked about the U.S. Constitution. Remember, there's a process called the amendments. There's 27 in all. The first 10 is the Bill of Rights. By doing this, they can propose constitutional amendments as long as they have 2/3 of both houses, being the House of Representatives and the Senate. That means they got to have 2/3 of the group. That means they get both Democrats and Republicans. It's not just a partisan thing. Congress is in charge of counting the electoral votes. They also oversee checks and balances, make sure that each branch of the government is working within its powers. The Congress has the power to approve or reject presidential nominees for various high-ranking officials, including the Supreme Court justices. The House has the sole authority to impeach officials. Now, that's what we had going on last year. That was the big news. Now it's coronavirus, then it was impeachment. To impeach means to accuse officials of misconduct in office. The House does not use impeachment powers often. It's only been done 3 times. Only 3 presidents were impeached. Andrew Johnson in 1868. They felt like that he was removing people because that they disagree with him, that he was misusing his power. Bill Clinton in 1998 with the whole issue of lying under oath. And Donald Trump in 2019, which was an abuse of power and that he was trying to overpower Congress, basically, is what they said. All were tried by the Senate and acquitted, so they would not be removed from office. So they were approved to be impeached by the House of Representatives all 3 times. But in all 3 times, the Senate acquitted them, meaning that they found them not guilty of these crimes and didn't remove from office. Andrew Johnson was impeached because of his accused unlawful removal of Secretary of War Edward Stanton. They believe that he did that misusing his power. Clinton was because he lied under oath, and Trump, like I said, because of the having foreign powers get involved in our elections, misusing his power, things like that. The requirements for Senate is that you have to be at least 30 years old, live in the state you represent, and have been a U.S. citizen for 9 years. The requirement for the House is that you must be at least 25 years old, live in the state you represent, and have been a citizen for 7 years. Now, the requirements for the House isn't as strict as for the Senate. It is not a requirement, but representatives traditionally live in the district they represent. The idea behind it is, why would you want to represent a district that you wouldn't even want to live in yourself? Kind of. Personal staff serve members in Congress to help with getting information on new bills. It's just to get information on stuff. Lobbyists are hired by private groups to influence government decision makers. They go in and try to convince these politicians to vote in favor of something. They're usually hired by special interest groups. For example, there's gun laws on the table. You're going to have the NRA getting involved and getting lobbyists, things like that. Congress also hires students from their home state to serve as interns or pages. It's a really good opportunity for those students that are picked to do that. Now, the most well-known thing they do is they make laws. They introduce bills, take part in committee work, and this is the most important thing they do. They're the law-making branch. Every bill starts with an idea. You may say, well, this needs to be a law. You tell your representative, they go, they debate it on the floor, they talk back and forth about it, they vote on it, and it goes through the due process, ultimately getting to the president. After it passes both houses, because both houses have to vote on it, both houses have to approve it, it goes to the president. The first thing that he can do is sign it and make it into a law. He can also veto or refuse to sign it. There's a couple other things he can do. He can leave it alone, and after a little while, once he leaves it alone, it'll just automatically become a law. That's kind of like the president will get his hands dirty, just kind of just let it be. But when it comes down to it, the president has that power. That's kind of part of the checks and balances. So this is a little bit about the legislative branch. They make the laws. They are in charge of impeaching the president, like we saw in 2019. And they're also in charge of finding if he's innocent or guilty, which is what we saw at the end of 2019. All the news going on about that. On in the beginning of 2020 is, debate about whether that process was done right or whatever. Needless to say, that is the job of both sides. So that's just a little bit about the legislative branch. The next video will be about the executive branch. So stay tuned for that.